Welcome to Be Latina's Instagram account. So, we all know that back to school is around the corner and that parents, educators, and even politicians are trying to determine what's the best approach. We all know that back to school and homeschooling are a challenge. Therefore, I'm pleased to announce that today I'm going to be joined by Harvard professor and founder and leader of the Center on Media and Child Health at the Boston Children's Hospital, Dr. Michael Rich. So while I try to connect with Dr. Rich, I would like you to submit any questions or any concerns you might have surrounding back to school and digital learning. So let me try to connect with Dr. Rich right now so we can talk about this very, very important topic. Okay, I have Dr. Rich right here. So thank you very much for those who are joining right now. As I said, Dr. Rich, how are you?
I am well. How are you?
I'm very, very happy to have you. I'm very honored. Thank you so much for your time. It's a pleasure.
It's my pleasure.
So for those who are joining right now, I would like to remind them that right now we have Dr. Michael Rich. He's the founder and leader of the Center on Media and Child Health at the Boston Children's Hospital. And he's also a Harvard professor. He's going to guide families. He's going to put, as he likes to say, the data back to science, right?
Yes.
The science back to data. So there's a lot of, I would like to start right away because, there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of things out there, especially surrounding kids and back to school.
Yes.
One of the very first misinformation is that kids don't get the virus. They don't get the coronavirus. And although it's, a very low percentage compared to an adult, they do get sick. They can get the virus. So in your personal opinion, do you think it's safe for kids to go back to school?
Well, I think we should move beyond opinion to science. Let's talk about what the science shows. It is not true that children are immune or are protected from coronavirus.
Right.
In fact, some kids get very, very sick, and even some kids have died from it. What is true is that they are not as vulnerable in terms of getting very sick from it. However, they actually can get infected or be carriers and even be asymptomatic. And actually, a study just came out today that showed that there is no relationship between the viral load, how much load of virus they are carrying in their body, and how symptomatic they are.
Wow.
So I am as concerned about who those children will come back to from school as I am about the children themselves. Even though I'm a pediatrician, we have to think of the whole family. That includes mama and papa and abuela and abuelo. And we've got to take care of the whole family. And because kids are less vulnerable, that also means that the elders are more vulnerable and the kids may not even know they're carrying something. So all that being said, first of all, in most school systems, we don't know what the plan is yet.
Correct.
We're still saying, well, it might be in school, it might be a hybrid, it might be all remote. And it will also be very fluid. In other words, it may start as in school or a hybrid, and then if there's a spike, they will pull to all remote. So I think the first thing we have to do is remain really flexible. I don't think we should act from fear, but I think we should act from caution and thoughtfulness. And that's not just thinking about the child, but thinking about the extended family.
Correct.
So,
and also you mentioned that we need to, be worried about abuelo and abuela, but also our teachers, because they have family too. They are worried, they are concerned. What would you say about that?
Well, I think we have to respect that very much. I mean, first of all, our teachers are heroes in our world.
Mm-hmm.
They are almost all underpaid for what they do. We entrust them with our most precious relatives, you know, for as much of their waking day as they spend with us. And, you know, we're now asking them to go above and beyond in terms of, you know, in terms of taking risks for themselves and their loved ones. And so I think we have to, if our kids do go back into school, I think we have to help our kids be aware that they are there to protect their teachers, their classmates, as much as themselves.
Correct. Fantastic. I also would like to ask you, what would you recommend? At the beginning of the live stream, I said that homeschooling and working from home is a challenge. What would you recommend to those parents that decide not to send their, because the majority of states, they are not going to open schools, but there's some that they are going to open. So for those parents that decide to homeschooling, what would you recommend?
Well, first of all, we have to understand that not everybody has the luxury of making that choice, because they may need to go out and earn the money that the family eats and pays rent with. And so that's the first piece, is how do we manage those people who are either single parents or double income parents, and how can they take care of things? The second thing is, a lot of parents feel that they aren't qualified to be their child's teacher. They feel, you know, like they just don't know the new math. They don't know, you know, for those for whom English is a second language and yet it's a first language for the child, it becomes problematic. So one of the things we can think about is what some people call micro-schooling, which is find a bubble, just the way the NBA has found a bubble in Orlando. Find a bubble of people who are negative, who, you know, can be in touch with each other, and have one parent or a succession of parents tag teaming serve as, you know, a teacher to 3 or 4 or 5 kids. And I think that may be a solution for a lot of people who are not able to either be completely free from going out of the house for a job, or who don't feel ready to teach their child.
Correct. That's great. We received some questions from our followers previously. And I have one question for you that I'm going to read. And it's from our user, Leslie Sanchez, and she would like to know, during virtual distance learning, will my kids be able to see their friends? And I would like to add to that question, how parents can help their kids to stay focused and not, you know, be distracting, because they're at home, they want to watch TV, they probably want to play. So how can we, you know, combine that?
Well, I think there's several questions in there, so I'll go at them one at a time.
Okay.
I think what Leslie brings up, which is really important, is that the social emotional learning that occurs in school is as important, perhaps even more important, than the academic learning they do. Think of it, this is the first time in their lives they've moved beyond the nuclear family into being an individual in a new society. So they learn how to behave, how not to behave, how to interact with people. And we learn those things by our mistakes as much as we do by the things we do right. They're building their tribes. They know who their friends are, who doesn't like them so much, or et cetera. And that's really important work. And we need to pay attention to how that can continue to go on, even if they're doing distance learning. Interestingly, one of the things that can be done at is these multi-user online games where the kids are gaming together. And interestingly, even with games, and I hate to say it, like, you know, Minecraft and Fortnite, where some parents are kind of not so happy about the content, when I talk to the kids that I take care of as a doctor, they don't talk about it as a game that they need to win or lose, or that they have to shoot somebody or whatever. They talk about it as hanging out with their friends. And so in some ways, it's kind of like going to the park and shooting hoops or playing baseball, in the sense that, you know, that wasn't about becoming part of the NBA or the Major League Baseball. It was about the arguments about who's out and who's safe, and, you know, who's on whose team. It was about forming those social relationships. So I think that's That's really critical. Now, the second question you had in there was, how do you keep them focused? That is really hard, okay? But I think there are a couple of things that we can do. And we are about to release a going back to school guide from the Center on Media and Child Health. And we can give you the information, the link to that. But one of the things that we say is really important is, first of all, keep a regular schedule. Wake up in the morning, get up, have your breakfast, take your shower, get ready for the day, and then to do their learning online in short enough chunks that it will hold with their attention span. So if you think about it, school has discrete periods. You know, you do math for 45 minutes, then you take a walk to the other side of the building and you do science. Yes. And we have to duplicate that at home, not because we're trying to be a school, but because we're trying to respond to the natural biological rhythms of a child's attention and a child's ability. And they need those downtimes in between to have a snack, to take a walk, to do things like that. And then the final thing I would say is have a dedicated place for them to do their schoolwork. So that they, you know, sit at the kitchen table and they have their computer up with just one window open, not multiple windows open, just one window open. And
I think we are having some problem.
There we
we're
go.
back.
Okay, we're back.
Yes.
They go elsewhere to do their entertainment or their socializing, so that you have a dedicated place. There's sort of a ritual quality to it that's very important. Here is where I do my homework. Here is where I listen to my teacher's lectures. There is where I play my video game.
Perfect. So I have another question, which I think is very, very important. And it's from Karen Martinez, and she's asking, how much time a kindergarten student should spend learning online?
Oh, that's hard, you know, because if you think about it, kindergarten is really not about math class, or reading or science. It's really about learning to be part of that class and be a student, really. It's really the prep for first grade. So I think it's not about time so much as what you do with that time. Now, I would say that the time for each chunk should be much shorter for a kindergartner than it is for, you know, even a first or second grader, just because their attention span is that. So I think that, you know, maybe 20 minutes max for any one activity, and then go to playing with blocks, or go to, you know, singing a song or listening to music, things of that nature. So I think that it needs to be broken up into different activities, some of which can be done with a screen, some of which cannot. One of the most important things in kindergarten is always circle time, right? Where you sit around the circle with, you know, crisscross applesauce, your hands in the lap. And so one of the things that I suggested is, since Zoom and some of these others have, you know, like the gallery view that looks kind of like the old TV show Hollywood Squares. So I think we should turn circle time into square time, or squares time, right? Where they can see each other and interact in that way.
That's great. And for those kids who are older that do have to spend some 45 minutes doing math or science, all that, do you think like the visible light of the screen, their iPads, their computers, will have an affect maybe their skin, their eyes, something like that?
Well, there is some early research that shows that the blue light, a lot of blue light coming off of a screen, can actually cause some long-term deterioration in retinal cells. That's very early research. One thing we definitely know is that the blue light suppresses the secretion of melatonin, the sleep hormone. So I encourage kids, not just for school, but for entertainment as well, to turn all screens off at least an hour before bedtime. That's really important. Skin, not so much, but what we are seeing is that the kids are not exposing their skin to the sunlight and not making the vitamin D. So I think that we need to make sure that kids are getting outside, getting some fresh air, but also we may need to supplement with vitamin D a little bit if we're spending much more time indoors.
Great. You mentioned before something about having a routine. What do you think of those parents that let their kids, studying or homeschooling in their PJs, in their pajamas, or, do you recommend, their routine need to be also them like wearing actual clothes instead of sleeping garments?
Yeah, I think that's really important for its, sort of ritualistic quality, right? That I am now getting up and going to work. This is not an extension of my sleep time or my relaxed time. Now, I mean, I think a lot of parents go to work, in their pajamas, except in Zoom meetings in which they put on a nice shirt like I have, but their pajama bottoms are still on, right? So, I think this leads to a really important thing, which is that we have to remember that kids listen to maybe 1% of what we say, but 100% of what we do. And so we have to recognize that we are role models for our children, especially around handling the unique situations of COVID-19 and the lockdown. But so how do we manage anxiety? How do we manage the unknown? But also, how do we manage our time on screens? And particularly for very young children, I am as worried about their parents' screen time as I am about the children's screen time, because when parents are on screens, they're not paying attention to their child. Right. And the child needs that so much, particularly in the early years.
Great. Something very important that I would like to ask you. Can parents let their kids, like once their class is over, can they let their kids at least, twice a week to have some meetings with their friends, virtual meetings, of course, Zoom, FaceTime, to do maybe homeworks or to talk about whatever they want to?
I think they should do it every day.
Okay.
Absolutely. No, and this goes back to the social emotional piece. I so much of school is that social emotional, building connections, reinforcing connections, maintaining relationships, figuring out how to get along with people. I think this is all really, really important. And I think that we make a mistake to sort of say social media is a bad thing. It just makes kids bad. It's not the medium that does it. It's us. It's what we do with social media. So if we use it to cyberbully or to, to slander people or ostracize people, it's just as bad as doing exactly the same thing in real life. But if we use it to connect with people, to laugh together, even to have meals together, under normal circumstances, whatever the way it used to be, we would recommend you not bring a screen to the dining room table, right? Because that's a distraction from those gathered around the table. But now, in some cases, it might be the way that you can have dinner with abuela, right? That you can be together with your family and friends in a new way. So I think that this is what's I think is really, really important, is for us to think about these as tools, as very powerful tools that, like an automobile, can give you great freedom and possibilities, but also can do harm when used thoughtlessly. And how can we use them to adapt to the new reality that we're facing and not only maintain, but actually amplify our humanity?
That's great. Something very important too is that today the CMCH released a guide, a back to school guide. Can you please tell us what exactly that means and what it has in there?
Absolutely. Well, we released a couple of months ago something called the Family Digital Wellness Guide, which is also available on our website. And what it is it really looks at the arc of childhood from infancy right through to adolescence, from developmental stages. And it says how screen media may interact with those tasks that the child is undergoing to develop and grow. and it talks about the ways that these screens can be helpful, as we've just talked about, but also things to be aware of, to be careful of, and to be concerned, and ultimately about how to talk to your kids about these things. Because interestingly, many parents tell me they are much more comfortable with the birds and the bees, with the sex talk with their kids, than they are with the internet talk. Because they think they know something about sex. They know nothing about the internet. So I think that we need to help each other learn to move into this new environment where, frankly, the kids live seamlessly between, physical space and the digital space. Now, what this follow-up, this return to school is about, is bringing those principles to bear on the answers we're going to need to find for our children right now as school comes closer, which is, how do I, if my school decides to go back in person or in hybrid, how do I ensure that my child is safe, that my child knows what to do and how to really navigate this new environment, but also how can my child effectively learn with remote learning? Because no matter what plan we come up with, it's going to have some element of digital learning. It may be a small element, it may be the entire thing, but this is a new skill set for both students and teachers to make the most of it. So it's really educating all of us how to best navigate the new school.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Please invite everybody to go to the website of the Center of Media and Child Health to look not only for this back to school guide, but to also learn more about the virus and how can they help their kids through this situation.
And if their answers aren't in there, ask us and we will answer you. So there's a room for a dialogue here. They call me the Mediatrician. So we have an online advice column called Ask the Mediatrician.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Rich. It's been a pleasure.
De nada.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Gracias.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.